It was a crime which pushed everything else off the front pages. 3 men, all known criminals, found shot dead in the Essex countryside. It was a cold-blooded, professional killing. The victims had many enemies, but which one wanted them executed?
And welcome back to a new video on the Essex Boys case. As always, if you are enjoying the content, please do give the video a thumbs up. And if you're interested in the Essex Boys case, or simply true crime in general, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. And in this video, I'll be giving my own input on the information which was provided by inmates on the Witness Protection Unit concerning their time with Darren Nicholls and his version of events for December the 6th, 1995. Let's start with the first statement. Darren was only on the Protected Witness Unit for a few days before he was returned to police custody. During this period, I recall that he was in general conversation with the inmates on the unit. He told them that while he had no prior knowledge of or involvement in the murders, he had taken 2 men in his car to the murder scene. 4 men arrived at the scene in the Range Rover, and after the murders had been committed, Darren took 3 men from the scene in his car. When he told his version of events, which was on an almost daily basis, he always laboured the point that he had no prior knowledge that the men were going to be shot. I formed the opinion that he did know, and he was lying. This impression was just my gut feeling, based on the amount of times he kept denying his involvement over and over again. Okay, so quite a few things to discuss during these few paragraphs here. The first thing to note, I guess, is that we seem to have gained an extra individual concerned in these murders. Bearing in mind that Darren Nicholls' version of events is that he drives Jack Womes to the murder scene. Michael Steele is the 4th passenger in the Range Rover, which is travelling down Workhouse Lane. So Darren Nicholls is only actually taking 1 individual to the murder scene. But according to this guy here, this man who had spent time with Darren Nicholls in the Protected Witness Unit, Darren Nicholls claimed that he took 2 people to the crime scene, and there was actually 4 individuals in the Range Rover. So just to break that down, we've got Tucker, Tate and Rolfe, and another individual in the Range Rover, plus 2 individuals being driven to the crime scene by Darren Nicholls. So just to clarify that small section on that statement there, just to go over it once more, it states the following. He said he had taken 2 men in his car to the murder scene. 4 men arrived at the scene in the Range Rover, and after the murders had been committed, Darren took 3 men away from the scene in his car. Now, the first thing that flashes through my mind when I actually read that is I try to base that on Darren Nicholls' original version of events. Could there be an element of truth there in terms of Womes and Steele's guilt? Now, what I mean by that is, could it be that Jack Womes and Michael Steele had some level of involvement in the murders in terms of luring Tucker, Tate and Rolfe to the bottom of Workhouse Lane, but the actual gunman was a mystery third party? Is that a possibility? I think what is also quite peculiar in this case is the getaway vehicle, the Volkswagen Passat, the beige Volkswagen Passat. I believe it was an estate vehicle, which Darren Nicholls claims he was driving on the evening of December the 6th. What I'm going to do for you is actually narrate for you part of Darren Nicholls' early police interview when he talks about a different car that he said he was driving on the night of the murders. Okay, Darren, now regarding the timescale of these murders, now we've had some conversation obviously about the vehicle that you travelled there in that night. You said you couldn't remember. Have you had any more thoughts on what vehicle that you went there in? I can't remember. It sort of sticks in my head. It might have been my firm's van, which is it's a yellow old Toyota Hilux, Hi-Ace, a really old battered old van, you know, yellow one. It's not mine. It actually belongs to DWT Interiors. What is it? A pickup or a van? A van. Right. Okay. Yeah. Battered up old van. Right, okay. Everybody at home, you are the getaway driver in a triple murder. Would you remember the vehicle that you drove that evening? For me personally, of course I would. There is a lot of confusion, not just about this vehicle. Bearing in mind we're talking about the vehicle which drives to Mark's Tay. This is where he meets Michael Steele driving his Hilux. But what I'm trying to get at here is that there's a lot of confusion about all of the vehicles that Darren Nicholls drives on the evening of December the 6th. So originally we have it's a Toyota Hilux, it's a Toyota Hiace, it's a battered old yellow van. But at some point in time, during Darren Nicholls' police interviews, that vehicle changes to a Volkswagen Golf convertible. How do you get these two vehicles mixed up? Very, very bizarre. The reason, as I say, that I've brought this up is that we then move on to the Volkswagen Passat, the actual getaway vehicle for the night of December the 6th. This is a vehicle which supposedly turns in Workhouse Lane, turns around in Workhouse Lane, and then pulls back out onto the main road. It does this not once, but twice. This is a vehicle that has 4 different brands of tyres on it, meaning it has 4 different tread patterns on that vehicle, yet not one tread pattern could be matched to the Volkswagen Passat entering or exiting Workhouse Lane. This Passat was also supposedly in pretty poor condition. It had a bad clutch, it leaked oil. The police did a test for motor oil at the start of the lane. Nothing came back to that Volkswagen Passat. So why would Darren Nicholls be quite cagey and I guess untruthful regarding the vehicles that he was driving on the evening of December the 6th? Not just the Volkswagen Passat, but potentially all the way back to the vehicle that he drives to Mark's Tay in. Not the Hilux, not the Toyota Hiace, but the Golf convertible. Why is there all this confusion regarding the cars? The reason I mention all of the vehicles concerned with Darren Nicholls, or supposedly connected to Darren Nicholls, is could it all relate somehow to this mystery third individual? Could it be that Darren Nicholls doesn't want to divulge the actual vehicles that he was driving that night because he's fearful that the police will do forensic testing, DNA testing on that vehicle, and it will somehow be linked to this third person, the other person who was driven away from the crime scene? Is that a possibility? Let's now move on to the next statement concerning another inmate on the witness protection scheme. The next statement is from the 22nd of August 2003, and it states the following. At the end of October, early November 1996, I was on the protected witness unit at HMP blanked out. A day or so after my arrival, I recall Darren Nicholls, Blogs 19, returned to the unit having been out of his police handlers. I think there were about 8 of us prisoners on the unit at that time. I remember meeting Darren on the day he returned. We chatted for some time and he quickly told me that his case was to do with the Range Rover killings in Essex. Darren also told me that before the killing he was a police informant and that the police officer he had been working with in Essex had been nicked soon after he, Darren, had been arrested. I cannot remember the name of the police officer Darren was working with, but I recall Darren saying he was nicked for drugs. Okay, now this line here is very important. Darren also told me that before the killing, he was a police informant. Now this is something I've discussed quite a lot in previous videos, and it's actually something that I think is quite plausible. Now, do we really know, can we really say for sure how long Darren had been a police informant? According to him, according to his police handlers, this all sort of originated after the murders at around Christmas time when he met this copper in a pub, basically, around Christmas time 1995. But do we believe him? Do we believe these bent police officers? I think there's every possibility that Darren Nicholls was a police informant before the killings, even months before the killings. And exactly what bearing does that have on the entire case? One of the more common assumptions made by viewers of my channel is that Darren Nicholls was somehow some kind of undercover police officer himself, or deeply entrenched somehow in the police force. That's how he's managed to disappear from the face of the planet. Could he have been some undercover officer the entire time? Well, I'm not sure I necessarily subscribe to that idea, but I think there's every possibility that he was more deeply entrenched with these officers than we've been led to believe, because it's a little bit strange that Jack Womes issues a threat to Darren Nicholls, and the very next day, Darren Darren Nicholls and everyone else is arrested. I'm just going to draw your attention to a small paragraph from the book Blogs 19 where it states the following. Darren Nicholls states, I watched a boat go out to sea and then Jack told me to meet him back in the lay-by. He was refitting the trailer when I pulled up behind him and then he got back in the transit. So how come you're not involved in our little business these days? He asked me. He was sitting in the driver's seat, staring straight through the windscreen. It was like he was trying to be cool or something. I scratched my head. Well, I don't have any passport anymore, but the main thing is it just, wasn't worth it. I never really made any money out of it. Jack nodded slowly, still staring straight ahead. Well, if you invested a bit of money in it, he continued, then you'd make a lot more. Mick and I were talking, and we wanted you to go down to Spain and run that end of the operation for us. We think you'd be good at it. We'll pay all your expenses and everything. It's a good offer. I'm not really interested. I don't really think this is the right business for me, to be honest, especially after what happened at Christmas. Jack's face erupted into a cheesy smile, which faded as quickly as it had appeared. Then he looked directly at me for the first time. Here's the thing, Darren. We want you to get more involved. If you don't, that's going to cause problems. What happened to Pat could easily happen to you. You can be replaced. I suddenly got this weird sensation, like I was flying backwards really fast. I wanted to be sick. I felt my legs buckle and my throat dried up in an instant. I thought I was going to faint and had to hold onto the side of the transit to try and steady myself. I couldn't speak. I was numb with shock. Jack had just threatened to kill me. Now, obviously, this is just pure speculation on my behalf here, but when I read that passage of the book Blogs 19, and I combine that with the fact that Darren Nicholls is pulled in the very next day, this whole big, huge police operation springs into action just 24 hours later, it does make me wonder if Darren Nicholls' role was a little bit more deeper than we've been led to believe, particularly in terms of his role as a police informant. Could it have been deemed that the situation with Darren Nicholls had become too dangerous and he had to be pulled out, or the operation had to be brought forward simply because of this death threat from Jack Womes? But as I say, really the most important thing to take from that paragraph there is the fact that Darren Nicholls claimed he was a police informant prior to the murders taking place. And this wasn't just a case of Darren Nicholls being a police informant. It was the fact that these police officers, these two police officers, DC Bird and DC Stimpson, these weren't just average police officers with Darren Nicholls on their books, so to speak. These officers were completely corrupt. So exactly what bearing does that have if Darren Nicholls was in fact a police informer before these murders took place? What bearing does that have on this case? The final statement from a member of the Witness Protection Unit states the following. It is difficult to make a judgment on whether Darren was telling the truth in relation to the case. Darren was a storyteller in general, but I do remember that in relation to the murders, Darren explained that he dropped off the two men for a meeting with their victims. Darren denied knowing what was going to happen. Darren explained he was elsewhere when the murders happened. He told me that he had been sent away for a drink at a pub, but I also remember I believe he said he was near some farm gates when he heard the sound of gunfire. Okay, so where I feel this particular statement gains in a little bit of credibility is how he describes Darren Nicholls' version of events for that evening. He basically says that Darren was sent away for a drink at a pub, but he also remembers that he was near some farm gates when he heard the sound of gunfire. Now, if we cast our mind back to when Jack Womes gets out of the vehicle, he gets out of the Volkswagen Passat, Darren says to him, "Can I go for a drink? Have I got time to go to the pub for a drink?" Jack says, "No, just wait nearby and I'll call you when I'm ready." So the inclusion of that little bit of detail there does have a strong ring of truth to it. But what really interests me in that statement is where he states the following. I believe he said he was near some farm gates when he heard the sound of gunfire. Now, obviously in this area we have a lot of farm gates. I'm not going to say that the locked 5-bar gate in front of the Range Rover is the only farm gate in the area, because that would simply be a complete pack of lies. There are a lot of farm gates in that area. But the first thing that springs to my mind when reading that particular line there is the footprints which are found around the Range Rover. The trainer prints that are found around the Range Rover. The fact that Darren Nicholls during his police interview does everything within his power to deflect from the fact that he's never owned a pair of trainers in years. I only wear boots. It definitely wasn't trainers that I was wearing. Definitely not. Not in a million years was I wearing trainers. What I'm going to do for you is just narrate for you a very short section of Darren Nicholls' police interview where he states the following. DC Brown asks the following. Right, now at that time, Darren, can you cast your mind back and think what you were wearing? What I was wearing? Oh, absolutely no hope. These are new boots, me old boots and me work boots, and I'm normally wearing a pair of boots, so I'm thinking that the pair of boots that I might have been wearing would I have been wearing boots? Yeah, because I didn't change my clothes or anything like that. I just went straight from work. Generally, work is tracksuit bottoms because you can move about in them. You don't sweat as much as jeans and all that. Just jeans and an old t-shirt. It would have been a pair of boots because I've never actually owned a pair of trainers. Well, till about a month ago. I've never had a pair for years. So yeah, Darren Nicholls wakes up. He has a shower in his boots. He eats his dinner in his boots. He plays tennis in his boots. Plays football in his boots. Hasn't had a pair of trainers for years, forever. Well, apart from recently when he just got a pair, but other than that, hasn't had a pair since they're invented, basically. I mean, just a very, very strange answer to that question. And obviously what I'm about to say next is just speculation, but it does make me wonder, was Darren Nicholls down Workhouse Lane? Was he waiting by the gate? Was that Nicholls' role to be a little bit more involved than just be the getaway driver? Was he there waiting at the gate? His job was to pretend to open it to let the Range Rover through. Does make me wonder. It's very strange, like I say, that he mentions to that guy that he was standing by some farm gates when he heard the sound of gunfire.